Very nice. Okay, we have people rolling in. We'll give it a minute for everybody to get their Zoom and their browsers in order and start and join the call. But those who are already here, welcome. This is I think our second or maybe the third webinar with Greg. Greg has history of delivering massive hits, and it's always about topics that are so practical, and it's always something that you could take home and start implementing from tomorrow. I was before we started rolling, I was discussing with Greg that over the course of just in last couple of months, I've spoke to at least four MDs and founders of recruiting businesses who the sentiment was that, hey, I'm not getting any younger. I put in the hard work, I put in the hard days, and now I just I want to take the business to a place where I can exit it and hang up my boots, or maybe explore something new. And that conversation was always, to me as a software company founder, there is so much information available on how to value software companies. There isn't much information available on how to value recruitment companies. So we turned to Greg, the master, and said, "Okay, Greg, can we do something about that over here?" And we have. We are very close to the holidays, so I really appreciate all of you making it. I don't think there is any introduction to Greg that's necessary, but just in case you have not heard about Greg, Greg is founder of the Savage Recruitment Academy, and I am a big fan of his newsletter called The Savage Truth. He has decades of experience in the space, and Savage Recruitment Academy is a really great resource for you to upscale your recruiters and your team. As a quick housekeeping announcement, we do have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We have a quite detailed presentation in front of us. And if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And at the end, we will take them, as they have come, right? So with that, let's dive in. Thank you so much, Greg, for joining us today. I know it's late where you are, so I appreciate you doing this.
So I'm coming to you from Sydney. So good morning, good afternoon, probably good morning to most of you, but there are people on this call from all over the world. You can see a picture of Sydney in the background. That is not live because it's 9 o'clock at night or 8:30 anyway. So lovely to have you all on the call. And yes, I'm going to talk about how to value your recruitment business, and I will give you some small insights in how to build a valuable business. The second topic is a separate one, which maybe we can do another day, but you can't talk about how to value it without hinting at what makes it valuable and therefore what you should do. Manon's hinted at my career does go back a long time, but in what expertise and knowledge do I have on this topic? And I share this with you just to give you comfort that I do have some insights, not for a minute blow my own trumpet, but I did start my own company when I was about 27 with two other guys, and 10 years later we did sell it, but we sold it via an IPO, a public listing. So that is one exit, not available to everybody, obviously, because you've got to have certain scale. And then I worked with Aquint, where I took a business that was turning over $5 million US to $100 million. When I say I took it, other people did the work. But we grew that business through opening offices around the world, 35 in 17 countries, but also through acquisition. And we probably made 15 acquisitions to enter markets. And to make 15 acquisitions, you've probably got to have 150 acquisition conversations, to be honest with you. And then I helped found a company called People to People. I'm still on the board of that company, but that company has made several acquisitions around Australia and New Zealand. And in the last 10 years, I've been on the boards of recruitment companies as an advisor. And many of them have made acquisitions, and several of them I've helped to exit. So I've been on both sides of the fence. I know. And it's amazing. I feel a bit guilty where I can change my argument depending which side I'm representing about the value of the business. But today, I'm going to cut through all that because I'm not selling anything except the best I can how you could value your recruitment business. So let's kick off, and we'll start with a little bit of information. I know a lot of you are from the UK. Well, you probably know how big your industry is. It's the third biggest country in the world for staffing. Number one is the US, and number two might surprise you, but it's Japan. And it turns over 41 billion. Now that was a couple of years ago. May have dropped a little, maybe not. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter because it's a huge number. That's 41 billion pounds spent by employers and staffing agencies. There's 30,000 recruitment companies across that country, and 77% of them have less than 10 employees. And a similar number, less than 100 million. So we've got the giants. You all know the giants, Adecco, Hayes, and all the rest of them, and they are gorillas, so to speak. I mean that in a complimentary way. They're huge. And that's because they're good. But actually, most of our industry is made up of micro businesses. And Australia's the same. Have a look at there. 29 billion US dollars. The surprising thing about Australia when it comes to this is that it's the sixth biggest staffing market in the world. And yet our population is only 25 million. And so they're much bigger countries. It's a very highly penetrated market for staffing. But again, 80% of Australian recruitment businesses have less than 10 staff. So what we're saying there, as I try to check, is that they are micro businesses or lifestyle businesses. Now, sometimes when I say lifestyle businesses, people get confused. I think, I'm working hard. I'm not sitting drinking champagne on my yacht. It's not a lifestyle. I don't mean that. I just mean it's not corporate. It's not sustainable. And it'll never be a saleable asset. And the amount of people I've looked in the eyes over the years and disappointed, or they've looked at me unbelievingly, is when they have talked to me about their 8-person recruitment company and it makes $500,000, and I've told them no one will buy it. And they're like, you must be mad. You don't know what you're talking about. Sadly, I do. And it depends on the makeup. And we'll talk about that obviously right now. Now, there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business. I mean, I know some guys, I know several. Over the years, I've known many, where there's 6 or 7 of them, 2 owners, let's say. They're all doing contingent perm. They've got some very good billers, and the business is making $1 million a year. And the staff are all making excellent incomes. And the owners are taking a dividend, and they are comfortable. They, by many standards, are wealthy. But their business can't be sold. This is the point. No one's going to buy a 6-person contingent permanent recruitment company. I promise you. Someone might pay you $20,000 for your database, but even that doesn't happen anymore because databases are available in other ways. So the first thing you need to decide as an owner is, what are you trying to do? Because there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business, right? If you're happy doing that, and you do realize that one day when you retire, you will lock the door and walk away. If you're happy with that, then that's absolutely fine. You know, plenty of people try to change from a lifestyle to a bigger business, and they end up in no man's land, I should say, where they're bigger but less profitable. It's a very dangerous and very common thing. So you've got to ask yourself, am I good at building a business, or am I good at recruiting? And if you're not good at building a business, then don't follow that path, or find somebody to hire into your business who can do that. So don't get caught in between a lifestyle business and a big one. Choose the direction. When I say big, a bigger one, a sustainable one, which I'll describe what that looks like shortly. Now, there's many small recruitment companies, but there's also what I call a lot of big dogs. They bark a lot on LinkedIn. You see them barking. They announce their awards. It's revenue growth. We've got more people. But I know, because I look under the covers with a lot of these, they're getting bigger, but they're getting less profitable. In fact, they specialize in profitless growth, which is an absolute disaster. Excuse me. And a lot of them actually will lose money. lose money, sure, and then go bust. And that happens. You can probably think about some big dogs that have disappeared. And that is because they do not understand that growth does not equal profitability. And unless your business is profitable, it has no value. So watch out for the revenue chasers in your own business as well. Watch out for low margin PSAs. Sorry, that's an Australian style of saying it. PSLs, you might call them in the UK. The thing about a lot of PSLs or PSAs is that the P stands for preferred, and that means you should be getting the work exclusively and in volume. And many PSAs are nothing of, or PSLs are nothing of the kind. They're not preferred at all. They're just a license to hunt on low margins. And then the client might pay you in 90 days, maybe. And you've got 3 consultants working on this PSL that's bringing you in not even enough to cover their salary. But around the board table, and I've sat around 1 million, they are celebrating the growth in revenue. And I'm saying, what about the gross profit, which you might call in the UK net fee income? Same thing. Permanent placement fees and net temporary margin. That's not growing at the same pace, and our costs are growing. The other mistake I see so often is we've got 8 consultants, we've got two high billers, and then we've got 6 mediocre, and then we hire 3 more mediocre ones. We're building on top of unsound foundations. And when I say mediocre, don't get me wrong, they're not mediocre human beings. They're just not very good consultants, and that might be your fault, might be their fault, usually a blend. But the facts are, they're not productive, they're not profitable. And if you add other consultants, instead of working on getting the productivity per consultant up, you won't be profitable. And if you're not profitable, no one's going to buy your business. And the other thing is that even if revenue is growing, you'll find in many cases the cost base is growing even faster to support that revenue. So we're getting bigger and less profitable. That is so common. And from the outside, people look and go, wow, they went from 50 to 100 recruiters. They opened 4 offices. They're doing so great. But under the covers, they're actually financing it by borrowing against their house mortgage. True story, often. So I like to say revenue is vanity. Look at our numbers grow. I'll sit around these board tables and the CEO, and wise, smart men and women talk about, look, our revenue is up $1 million over the last 2 years. And then it takes somebody with a clinical eye to say, but our profit has gone backwards and our revenue's up. So the profit, the P&L is very, very helpful, but even the P&L is not the true story. It's a outline of what has happened, but it doesn't show the cash. So cash is reality, and no one is going to buy a fast-growing sales company revenue line if the profit line is sinking. They won't. Or they'll buy it at what I call a FI sale value, not enough to make the owners any money at all. So to create an exit value, you've got to build a sustainable recruitment business. And by sustainable, I mean it's not reliant on the owners or the managers or a small group of billers. What a smart buyer is looking for is what is the risks. And I'm going to encourage you to go after this, if you're an owner or a senior person, to have a little round table and look at your business instead of with the ego eye, which says we're great, look at it with the critical eye and ask yourself, what are our risks? What are our points of failure? Because a buyer will look at those and they'll discount your value or not buy you at all if those failure points are there. So for example, we've got 10 recruiters and we made $1 million. But when they dig in, they find out that 80% of the GP is coming from 3 of those recruiters. Not buying that because it only takes 2 resignations and a pregnancy and they haven't got any money. The buyer is thinking that. So they won't buy. Now, people often, I think people think they know how the value of a recruitment business is calculated, and there is a typical formula. And typically, it's the sale price is calculated on a multiple, right, of historical profit. But what a lot of people don't understand is that what a buyer is really buying is the certainty of future profits. So we might calculate it on historical profits, but the buyer will look, if the buyer knows what they're doing, and increasingly they do, they know what they're doing, They will look at the certainty of future profits. So they will look at your staff turnover. They will look at contracts you've got with clients. They'll look at when preferred supplier agreements end. They'll look at the economy. They'll look at your technology. So smart buyers will assess and value on the basis of whether, yes, it starts from the profit. Obviously, a company making 10 million is going to be worth more than a company making 1 million, clearly. But in both cases, the buyer will look at, if I buy it on the profit of 5 times 10, is it going to be making 5? Is it going to be making 10 next year and the year after or more? Because usually they want 1 and 1 to make 3. All right, they want to buy a business that's going to grow its profitability. So I encourage you to think of the concept of how to make your business sale ready. And when I say that to people, they go, but I'm not looking to sell my business. Well, 2 comments to that. One is, you will be one day. And secondly, the characteristics of a highly saleable business are the same things that make it highly profitable in the good times and very resilient in a downturn. So making it saleable doesn't mean you have to sell it. It just makes you sturdy, strong, valuable, vibrant, resilient is in fact the word I'm looking for. And so people often say to me, what multiple am I worth? Because, you know, they just read in the paper that a Japanese, read online rather, I should say, don't show your age, baby boomer. They read that some Japanese company came in and bought another company for 21 times earnings. Well, probably not that, 15 times earnings. That happens. And then they think that their 3-person business in the suburbs is worth 15 times. And it's not. Right? And profit is only one component of the valuation. Have a look at this. First of all, of course, as I said, EBIT normally, or EBITDA sometimes, in other words, profit before tax, is the starting point. But how is it calculated? It doesn't have to be normalized. Now, what I mean by that is your business made $1 million last year, but you, the owner, and your partner, both owners, only paid yourself $80,000 a year, and you ran the business. But if you replaced yourselves with an outside manager, you'd have to pay 160. The buyer will say, that's a false economy. We need to normalize your costs and therefore bring your profit down. That will happen routinely. There's other normalizations that will happen. But also, it's quite common for the buyer to say, hey, you made $1 million last year, but the year before you made 500, and the year before you made 100. We don't think the million you made is sustainable. We want to buy your company on an average of the last 2 or even 3 years. So it's not just the profit. It is the profit, but it can be massaged depending, and it's a negotiation point. And people talk about the multiple. Well, remember that there's often several multiples. Several multiples? What are you talking about? Well, usually, jumping ahead, there's going to be an earnout. It is very unlikely anyone's going to come in and say, your business is making $1 million, I value it at 4 times, that's 4 million, here's 4 million, thank you very much, let's have a drink and then you can go. It's not going to happen, right? You will have to earn out, which means you'll have to stay in for 2 years often, 1, sometimes 3, I've seen 5. And your payment, your actual payment, you'll be paid your salary and other agreed remuneration, but your price for your business might be paid over 3, typically, many different versions, 3 stages. So you might have someone say, I'll pay you 3 times at deal date, but that's going to be for 50% of your business. And then after 12 months, we'll run the profit figure again, and I'll pay you 3.5 times. And after 24 months, we'll run the 12 months again, and I'll pay you 4 times. I'm making those numbers up. Those are real things that have happened before in my experience, but none of those examples are what you should then apply and say, my business is worth that, right? Please don't do that, because each case must be measured differently. So we've got to look at earnout conditions, deal structure. Sometimes they don't want both the owners. They say, I'd like that person to phase out. I do need this. Many, many variations. I spoke about normalization, which you've got to be careful for, because it means adjusting revenue and expenses to reflect the business as if someone else was running it. So if you're underpaying yourself or you've got loans to yourself, this will all be normalized. And often that increases the expenses and reduces the profit that they will do the calculation on. Occasionally, it can increase the profit, actually. Not often, though. So typical deal structure. Now, please, this is just an example. There are many, many variations. It'll be based on a multiple of EBIT or EBITDA sometimes. Profit will be normalized, as I explained. 25 to 50%, and I've seen all sorts of variations, will be paid on deal date. So the deal date is the 1st of July, 2026. We'll run the profit multiple, which we've agreed is 4. You made $1 million. 1 times 4 is 4, but we're only buying 50%. $2 million will be paid on the deal date. And then the second payment, which might be 25, 33 or whatever, will be paid after 12 months, and the final payment on the second 12 months. So it'll take you 2 years to get paid. That is pretty typical, although there are many, many variations, and the multiples might be different at each stage. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but do not quote this. This is just indicative. I mean, quote it as a discussion point, but we were just talking about this offline. Very large executive search companies, the Heidrick Struggles of this world, they are global, they've got thousands of recruiters, they've got sustainable revenue and profit. They might go for 8, 9, 10 times. Don't try and apply that to your 6-person business in Croydon. It's not going to apply. So a small perm business, and by small, I mean 8 people or less, it's only going to get 1 or 2 times. Now, there can be exceptions to this, right? If it's in a very tight niche that somebody wants to get into, who thinks they can then sell temp to there are variations. If it's blended temp and perm, and that's where the temp, this is not at the sales line, by the way, this is at the net fee income line or gross profit. If it's more than 50% temp, you're going to get 3 times. You might get 4 times. If it's bigger, you might even get 5 times. If it's particularly appealing in a niche, you might get 6, you might even get 7. Those things do happen, but not as often as people think. The publicity comes for the high multiples, but it's not normal. All right. And also remember, like, people get excited. A Japanese company made some acquisitions in Australia. It was a few years ago now. They paid 10 times. Big company. They bought Chandler McLeod. This is public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything. And they bought PeopleBank, 2 very big companies. And I think they paid 10 times. But that Japanese company is trading on the Tokyo Stock Exchange at 25 times. They nearly tripled their money on the day they bought it. So don't think that they're going to come. Anyone's going to come and pay 10 times for your much more vulnerable firm-only business. None of that I've said, and there's the disclaimer. It's not a quote on the value of a business. It's just to give you a feel. These are the conversations I see all the time. Right? I'm having, as an advisor, I'm hearing these sorts of conversations, and I'm seeing these transactions all the time. And by the way, not only in Australia, I mean, I'm an owner of a business in the UK, and we were having an acquisition conversation this week, and it's fallen over. Guess what? On the multiple. So this is real.
Yeah. Just
the other thing you need. Yeah.
I see, from the beginning, a lot more people have now joined in. So I want to make the housekeeping announcement again. Guys, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of Zoom. We have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the presentation, and we will get to them. Sorry to interrupt you, Greg. Let's go.
That's okay. By the way, just that's good. Put your questions in. I can't see them. I've set the configuration not to see them because I don't want to get distracted while I'm concentrating on delivering this to you, but I will address them at the end if I can. The other thing is, it's hard advice to give an owner because you're very emotional about your company. I was extreme. When I sold my business, I thought everyone was undervaluing it. They didn't understand. But it's like a house, right? The value of your company and the value of your house is what someone's prepared to pay, not what you think it's worth. And mostly people overestimate the value of their recruitment businesses. And a good question is to ask yourself, why would you buy your company? Knowing what you know, obviously it's hypothetical because you won't buy your own company. But if you were to come in and buy your company, knowing what you know from the inside, would you buy it? And if not, why not? And what would you need to fix? Because there'll be a very, very deep due diligence and you won't be able to hide anything. And I see so many acquisitions fall over because the promise or the sales pitch is uncovered when they do the due diligence. And so you've got to focus on what the buyer will see, and they will see the risks. and that's how they will calculate the value. So as obviously, it's hard not to get emotional about your company. When I say emotional, I don't mean crying or anything like that. I just mean you put a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you believe in it, and you just got to make sure that that doesn't color and inflate what you expect for the business, because you've got to be pragmatic. I call it play the protect war game. In other words, say to us, it's actually quite a fun thing to do. Well, fun is the wrong word because it can be scary. Say your top 2 or 3 trusted inside leaders. Let's play the protect war game. If we wanted to put ourselves out of business, what would we do? And I swear to God, someone will say, we'll hire Mary and we'll hire Jane. And you all go, that happens, we're rooted. Yes. Do something about that. Get other Marys and Janes so that one loss of a staff or 2 loss of a staff. Or the other one might be, well, if we lost ABC client and XYZ client, we'd be absolutely right. We're getting a total of 30% of our GP from 2 clients. Now that's attractive in a sense, but it's actually not attractive to a buyer because they think, what happens if we lose one or both of them? So play the protect war game with yourself. And the war game is hypothetical. We know what's going on in our business. How would we put ourselves out of business? And then build a business that you can't put yourself out of business in, so to speak. Bit wordy, but I think you get my point. When I said cut the emotion, people say to me, and I've heard this in so many acquisition and briefing conversations, where the advisor might say, look, your business is worth about 2.5 times profit. And the owner will say, how can that be? Do you know what I've done to build this business? Do you know how hard I've worked? But it's not relevant. No one's going to pay you for what work you did. They're going to pay you for what you've created. There is a difference, right? What you've created is what the buyer's looking for. They don't care that you had 50 sleepless nights or whatever it is. It's what you've created is where the value lies. The other thing I encourage people to do, because in a funny way, the bigger your business, the less buyers there are. Think about it. I'm going to just pick a city in London, in the UK, I know, I'll just make it up. Manchester, let's say, a big city, but not as big as London. But so Manchester, if you're making a profit of $1 million in Manchester, there's probably, I don't know, I'm going to make it up, 50 or 100 other agencies who could buy you in Manchester. But if you're making $20 million in Manchester, there may not be more than 5 companies that could buy you in Manchester because they're going to have to pay $100 million. So you've got to think about who the buyer might be and who you'll be attracted to. Sometimes, and I've seen this work well, the senior staff can buy the business from the owners. That can work very well because it's much safer because everyone knows everyone and there's no hidden, phrase, skeletons in the cupboard because everyone knows. Maybe one of your competitors would acquire you to take a big leap forward. Maybe a national group wants to get into your city. Maybe in Australia, we often have multinationals wanting to buy as a foothold in this market. Even private equity is getting interested in recruitment companies. So that's a possibility. You have to be big, and that's making a deal with the devil, so be careful there. All sorts of, and even a listing is possible. Difficult in this climate, I would say, staffing. But, when I listed my recruitment company in 1998, I know half of you weren't born, sorry about that, but it listed it at a 9 times multiple, and that night it was 10 times because the share price went up. Fabulous. There's a lot of downsides of being a listed recruitment company as well, which I'll share with you another day. So you want to build sustainability. That's the phrase I've used. They're going to look for your points of failure. Where are the points of failure? So, for example, we're an accounting recruiter. We've got 20 recruiters in accounting, but we also do marketing. We've got a recruiter in marketing, and we also do cybersecurity. We've got 1 recruiter in cybersecurity. And so, therefore, our website says accounting, marketing, and cybersecurity. A buyer will look at that and go, a smart buyer will go, yeah, 1 resignation in cybersecurity, we're no longer in it. 1 resignation in marketing, we're no longer in it. No value on that at all. Right? They will look at annuity revenue, which is temp, contract, etc. I will explain more on that. They'll look at the revenue sources. They won't want to see more than 10% of GP from any one client. Now, we don't want you to go to your client where you've got 15% of your GP and shrink it. We want to grow that, but we want to grow other sources of revenue. They'll look at your leadership. They'll look closely at your leadership outside of the 1, 2, 3 owners, because the owners are going to leave. They'll look at the next tier. So it is very much in your interest to build a second tier of management. I will touch on that in more detail. They'll look at your client relationships. They'll look at the volume of business from individual clients. They'll love to see repeat business and they'll like to see multiple touch points. So we're in this client, you say, and then they see all you do is deal with the talent acquisition manager. But they'll love to see you deal with the finance director, the CIO, whatever it might be. They'll look at your funding and your debtors. They'll look at your systems and processes and corporate governance. Now, I've gone through that fairly quickly because I'm going to dive in more detail. Annuity revenue means temp. It means contract. It means locum. It could be RPO. It means sustainable recurring revenue. Now, before I leap into this, the advice I'm going to give is that a company that has a blend of annuity revenue and permanent placement fees is the most profitable and the most resilient and therefore the most valuable. But you've got to look at your own circumstances, your country, your city, your market, your conditions before you do anything different to what you're doing now. But what a buyer likes is that the annuity revenue, if we're running 150 temps and we've got 2 consultants running that, or 3, let's say, if one of those consultants left, it's an irritation, but it's not a disaster. And even if they all left, if those 150 temps are out on average 3-month contracts, it'd be a pain in the ass, don't get me wrong. But we wouldn't lose much of that revenue if we were quick to act. Therefore, it's more sustainable. But if we had 3 permanent recruiters doing that volume and they left, we'd have nothing. So I like, and I've built all my companies this way ultimately, and they've all ended up being valuable in their own rights. Probably 70% of your total GP is temp and 30% is perm. And some people, when they hear me say this, oh, you're against perm. I'm not against permanent. I love it. It's profitable. It's juicy. It's gorgeous. It's just unfaithful, as you have found out in the last 2 years. It's unfaithful. It will decline more quickly than temp will normally, and temp will bounce back first. So typically, and there's different circumstances, but if your GP, the temp drops below 50 of your total GP, your business will be less valuable. In fact, I think I've got a very nice little hypothetical, not hypothetical, example here. We've got on the left a 10 consultant business. It does 4 million in GP. That can be pounds or dollars, doesn't matter. But they're all permanent. Makes 1.25 million in EBIT. Value, 1.5 million, if anyone will buy it. Down the road is an 8 consultant company. It does 4 million in GP. 75% of it is temp and contract. It does 1 million in EBIT. It is less profitable than the hypothetical perm business on the left. It's valued at multiple times more. And there'll be lots of buyers. That is a fact, which I've received over 45 years of doing this. Hard to believe because I know I look young in that, but that's true. So let's have a look at the global temp and contract. I'll whip through this, but just to give you some, it's worth 650 billion a couple of years ago. I would think it's grown, actually, even though I might be wrong, but it wouldn't be much different. It's estimated by staffing industry analysts to be 990 billion by 2030. AI, etc., as a threat to the recruitment industry is very real. There'll be change. I personally think executive search will grow, and I think temp and contract will grow. I actually think the part of the market to be most affected by AI automation is in competition, contingent, mid-level, permanent search. So if that's all you do, I think it's going to be a hard road. So the UK, the market's worth 43 billion, as I said, but 36 billion of it is temp and contract. In the UK, okay, admittedly, this was 4 or 5 years ago. And so you might say, well, that's old data. Well, maybe, but it's not going to be much different. Recruitment agencies made 22.4 million temp placements in that year, which is basically 86,000 temp placements a day. It is a monolith of an industry, the temporary industry. It's very competitive, but it's big. Australia, much the same. Some facts and figures for you. So we're 23 billion in this country. I've dropped New Zealand in there just in case anyone has some interest in that. There's 8,000 temporary agencies in Australia. They might do permanent as well. Healthcare social assistance is the largest. And I like saying this to my cocky, obnoxious, egotistical lawyer and finance banking friends I have when they'd start taking the mickey out of recruitment. One of the things I remind them is that the recruitment industry is larger than the legal and the accounting profession combined. Our industry is huge. Yeah, our industry is huge. Now, when I say the legal and accounting profession, I mean law firms and accounting firms. You add up every dollar they charge their clients, doesn't even hit the staffing industry. So that tends to put those guys in their place. So temp and contract is important to a recruitment company because it gives you multiple revenue streams. It diversifies you away from perm, which is so volatile. It's a stronger client relationship because often, even if you've got a good perm client, you might make 2 or 3 placements a year, but a good temp client might be a placement a week. So you're talking to them all the time. Your staff are in their office. You're engaging with them. It's easier to business development perm if you're doing temp. You can get big tenders. The government's all over temp. Big business is all over temp. It's harder to lose typically because, as you know, perm is, if there's a temp working in there, the client is likely to come back to you for their next temp. But if there's a perm placement made 3 months ago, they'll go to whoever knocked on their door last, as you well know. You guys are all over that. So temp and contract is an important part. I said I'd touch on how to build a valuable business. If you are thinking of getting into temp or growing temp, don't just do it because some crazy guy in Australia said you should. Just identify your market, test the logic. Like if you're big in accounting, let me give another example. If you're in Birmingham and you're big in tech, well then just identify that your clients who use you for perm do hire temp staff through other agencies. If that's true in large numbers, then that's a great idea to get into temp. You still got to have a good plan. Assess what your competitors are doing. Look at how successful they are. Get your resources in place, right? Do your research about compliance and bill rates and the tech you're going to need. It's going to be different technology to running a permanent business. The payrolling framework. There's a lot of insurance you get. You run a lot of risk. Those temps, as you know, it depends on the laws in your country, depends on the status of a temp versus a contractor. And I know it's different in the UK from Australia. That's why you've got to know what you're talking about. Get the right insurances. You need cash to fund a temp. Ironically, the quicker you grow your temp business, the more likely you are to run out of money because you understand, don't you, that you pay your temps weekly and the client pays you whenever the client feels like they pay you, which might be monthly. Now, if you've got 100 temps, the business that I founded called People to People, it's successful. That's not the first one. It's the second one. I'm still on the board. They pay 1,000 temps a week. Their weekly payroll is millions. And if clients pay late, that's very, very tricky. So be careful about that. You need a dedicated temp business plan. You need to have 5 or 10 clients that are going to be your beachhead clients where you've got great permanent relationships and you're going to tackle them with temp. You've got to, don't for a minute think you're going to start a serious temp business if you ask your permanent recruiters to do temp as well. Just forget it. And please forget it. Yes, you can have 10 perm recruiters and ask them to do temp. And they might end up with 2 or 3 temps each. And therefore you could come back to me and say, you're wrong, Greg, we've got 25 temps, except you would be wrong. Because 2 things would have happened. Your perms will bill less because they've been distracted, but also if it had dedicated temp recruiters, you would have 100 temps out, not 25. And some other thoughts there about marketing. It's a constant outbound engagement plan. Also, you need a targeted pool, I should say, of temp workers. And sometimes they can be your perm candidates, but mostly they're not. Because in many, many areas, you have dedicated people who actually contract for a living, not looking for a permanent job. And they are your best because you will roll them from assignment to assignment. There is risks of the temporary business. And if they're not managed, they will reduce your value. You've got to understand the business. And if you're going to get into it, I mean, I sit opposite owners of recruitment businesses that have got a big temp business, and I ask them to tell me the difference between a margin versus a markup. And they do not know, which is kind of worrying because they calculate their price on markup when they think they're doing margin. So if you don't understand it, you can go to my blog, and I've got a blog on that, or buy one of my books. It's full of these explanations. But that's just really basic. That's literally not knowing your left arm from your right arm if you're running a temporary business. You've got to have the funding and cash flow. Just a little story. Some of you who've been to Australia may remember years ago, our second biggest airline was called Ansett. We've got Qantas and we had Ansett, and Ansett was big. And Ansett went bust about 20 years ago. The day Ansett went bust, 53 recruitment companies went bust because they had hundreds of temps working at Ansett, thousands actually. And Ansett didn't pay them because they weren't secured creditors. They had to pay the temps. That's the law. Good night, nurse. So you've got to be very, very careful about having high exposure to. I mean, it's good to have big clients, of course, but you've got to make sure they're going to be able to pay you. There's compliance and regulations. If a temp cuts a finger off at work, in your client's employment, that is your responsibility. And people don't often realize that. Okay, let's move on. Other factors that increase the value of your recruitment business is, of course, the client mix and the relationships. And a buyer will look at this. They will dive right into. They will want a list of all your clients and revenue per client. And they'll want to compare revenue in your top 20 clients to the previous year and the year before that, because they're looking for stability and they're looking for growth and they're looking for multiple orders within the same clients and multiple revenue. And they love to see you made 10 perm placements there, and you've got 10 temps, and you've had this for 5 years. Love that. That's going to increase the value of your business if you've had multiple clients like that. They look for deep embedded client relationships. They don't want to see that only one recruiter owns a client relationship. And often in many companies, that's the owner. And you might think, well, that's good. It's not really good because the buyer's thinking, well, when the owner leaves after I bought his business or her business, they don't want to see a client with more than 10% of your GP typically. They like focus and they do like niche, but be careful. You want to keep on, as I said before, looking at your business with a critical eye and looking at the threats. Are you over niched? Are you in such a tiny niche that might disappear? And they will look at PSAs or PSLs. I should have changed. PSLs, I think we call it. There are a lot of people from Australia going to watch this tomorrow. They're probably not watching it now. It's 9 o'clock, but they will get it tomorrow. So they call it PSAs. They will look to see if they actually are preferred and if the margins are healthy and if you're paid on time. So just having PSLs. The company that we were looking to acquire this week, not acquire this week, but we were examining this week in the UK, one of their things on their pitch was that they had 78 PSLs, but they only had total fee income, GP, net fee income, of 4.5 million, and they had 78 and I was like, what kind of PSLs are they? They must be getting hardly any work from them. So it's not valuable unless it's valuable. And they'll look at your revenue earners, right? So they will look for multiple revenue earners in each location. Now, when I say location, if you've got geographical locations, you've got an office in Birmingham, one in Manchester, one in London. But when they dig in, they find you've got 12 people in London and 2 in each of Manchester and Birmingham. They will discount that because it only takes a resignation and that location is gone. They'll want to see that if you've got 10 recruiters, but most of the billing has come from your 2 superstars, that will reduce your value. They love the superstars, but they want solid billings across. They'll look at who drives sales and who owns sales, and they'll dig into that. because plenty of recruitment companies, maybe yours, the owners are the ones who hold the sales relationships and they pass on the jobs for the more junior people to fill. And that works very nicely and it drives the revenue and the profit. Excuse me. But the buyer will say, but hold on, what happens when the owners or the top 3 or 4 leave? Who's going to, the sales contact is going to leave. They'll look at staff turnover, they'll look at productivity per consultant, they'll look at GP per consultant, they'll look if your consultants, look at it on an individual basis, but if your consultants are earning an average, let me make something up, £50,000 a year, and your average income per consultant is 90,000, that is not going to fly. They'll be looking for 2.5 times multiple, at least. Okay. Just let me remind you of I think I touched on this actually, because I just winged it, but the risk of shallow diversification. If you say we're in accounting, we're in marketing, and we're in tech, but you've only got 1 or 2 people in marketing and tech, you're not in that specialization. It's no value, and it's not even valuable to you, even if the people in there are billing well, because if they leave, you're not in it anymore. So you've got to build like at least 3 people in a vertical before you can say you're in that vertical. And I wouldn't even sleep well with 3. I'd look to build it. And if you might say, well, I don't want to put so much investment in that, well, then don't go into it. Build your core vertical. Or, yeah, diversify, but diversify with intent, because a buyer will not like seeing, oh, we've got 1 person in marketing, we've got 1 in cybersecurity, we've got 1 in something else, and 23 in accounting. They're going to go, yeah, you're not in those things. And they'll look at process, increasingly so. In other words, we have a defined process, and everyone uses that process. And typically that's all around tech now, and the use of the ATS and the documentation. And we have a proven staff induction and training, because you know as well as I do, plenty of recruitment companies have processes, but Betty doesn't use it because she's been here 10 years. And Marcus is billing a lot. He's got a bit arrogant, so he doesn't do it. And none of the owners do it because they're the owners. And there is no documented, or there is no universal process. And a buyer will look at that, look at the CRM, look at the ATS, look at contracts, look at terms of business. And when you look at these things in companies, and again, remember I asked you to look at your own company, you will see that people, I get an email a week, or LinkedIn normally, from somebody around the world who says, oh, Greg, can you help me? My client won't pay my fee, and it's terrible, and I've placed this good person, and blah, blah. What should I do? I write back 1 sentence. Did you get your terms of business signed? 80% of the time, no. I write back, I'm sorry, mate, I can't help you. How can I help you? If you didn't get, why would you start doing the work? I'm sure you have a process in your company. It's just an example, right? And a buyer will look at this. They'll want to see a system that ensures consistency and quality and proven replicable training processes. And increasingly, that's going to include deployment of automation and AI. And one of the things I'm seeing already is that people are deploying Band-Aid AI in their businesses, which is not very good in some cases. The consultants aren't trained, and only some of them are using it. And a buyer will come in and say, that's a dog's breakfast. It's not valuable. Don't do it. I'm not saying don't employ AI. I'm saying you should employ the AI as long as it's good, proven, and you're using it to automate the right parts of the process, and that it is actually integrated into your business, not something that sits outside the rest of the tech. And that leads me on to what I call the looming technology tsunami. I think buyers are going, and this is where I'm getting in, like everything I've said so far is based on my experience. This is more a prediction, but I think buyers will start to look at the tech risk of the businesses they buy. And if they come in and they see you really have been avoiding updating your technology, there's no modernization of using automation. You've automated, or where you have automated, you've automated the wrong parts of the process, the wrong tech's been employed, you've sort of band-aided it, and there's no integration. And not only that, your recruiters don't have the skills to really thrive in that part of the job that tech doesn't do. I know this is scary for all of you. It's scary for everybody. But honestly, that's going to reduce the value of a business. And Nanan was saying, we were talking, he was saying he's had a lot of chat from buyers who are saying, not buyers, owners who are saying, it's maybe time to retire. A lot of people are thinking that because they don't want to face this tech risk. And I understand that, but a buyer's going to look at that and go, so has this business been allowed to sort of run fallow? By that I mean, has it been allowed to drift? Is it losing momentum and clients because the owner has not run towards the technology? So it's scary, and it's not probably what you wanted to hear, but it's probably good to hear, because if you allow your business to become sort of totally analog and think, yes, it's all going to rely on human relationships, well, you can't buy, we don't buy and sell people, right? I know they come with the acquisition, but they have the right to leave. And so a buyer is nervous about that and will prefer something that comes with great people and great technology. And margins. If you're a low margin business, even if you're making a profit, as I said, PSLs, only if they are profitable, they'll look at your average temp margins. And you need to know what a margin is. It's not a markup. Margin is that percentage of the bill rate to the client that ends up as income to your business after paying the temp and the payroll tax and social security, whatever it might be. And then that is a percentage of the sales is your margin. And it might be anything between, I don't know, as low as 8% in some places, as high as 25. I think the average in Australia last year was 17. But then what they'll look at is whether your temp margin over the last 5 years has declined. Because your temp pounds could go up while your margin goes down. They'll see that and they'll go, something is wrong. They'll look at the temp tenure. You've got 100 temps out in your recruitment company, and I've got 100 temps in my recruitment company. But my temps are out on an average of a week assignment, and your temps are out at a value of 3 months. You're much more valuable. It's much more stable. They'll look at your fee percentages. They'll look at your fee structure. They'll love to see retained. They'll love to see exclusive. They'd love to see recruit business. And they'll look at how quickly you get paid. All of that is going to affect the price. So don't just think that the operating profit, EBIT, I should say, is going to be the only thing that affects the price. As I touched on, we've got the second tier of management. They'll like to see a succession plan. They'll like to see a low risk when the founders leave. And this is where your owners have to be really quite brave. And actually, because you run your business, it's your business, it's important, it's part of your ego, it's part of your self-esteem. But actually, you want other people around you who are taking over increased responsibility. If they do it well, and I promise you, it might surprise you, they may end up doing it better than you. And that was my superpower in running a recruitment business. I wasn't good at much, but I was very good at hiring people who were better than me. And I'm not afraid to say it. And helping them be great at the job. And that's what made these businesses successful. Sometimes I'd go, wow, that guy really runs the Sydney office better than I could have, but I'm the owner of the business, so that's not a bad thing. Look for a third tier of team leaders, people who bill and lead. That's very valuable, especially in this environment. You've got people who can bill and help other people succeed. Billing managers, hardest job in recruitment, by the way. And they'll look at your reward system, how your commission structures work. Are they fair and attractive, but also sustainable for the business? All of those things will be examined, and all of them will affect your value. You really want to get to a point where a buyer can come in and say, hey, the 3 owners or the 2 owners or the 1 owner, they can stay for a year or 2, but we can phase them out and the business will be stronger than ever. Now, you might say, oh, that hurts my ego. Don't worry. It's not your ego that's going to go into your bank account. You want them to see that you can leave without damaging the profitability of the business. And if your departure as an owner would damage the profitability of the business, even with a 1 or 2 year earnout, then you're not ready to sell, or you'll get a diminished price. They like to look at the right people. I call it GWAC. They want to see that the people you've hired into the jobs that count, they get it, and they want it. And a lot of recruitment companies, as you well know, that promote people into leadership jobs because they're the highest biller. One of the many stupid, it might be that the best biller is the best for leadership, but it is completely analogous to saying, hey, this guy or this woman scores the most goals in our soccer team, football team, I apologize, and so therefore we're going to make her captain. That makes no sense. Having the ability to score goals, and the metaphor is placements, is not the same as leading a team. They're different skills. But in recruitment, we reward high billers by putting them into leadership roles, and they hate it, and the people reporting to them hate it. And you're all nodding your heads because you've all done it. You may even be one of them. So people who get it, people who want it, and people who have the capability to lead and help other recruiters be productive. That is a very simple slide, very hard to do that, and that's what grows a recruitment business. I'm getting towards the end, so prepare your questions if you have any. Eliminate the crud. By that, I mean clean up your house. By the house, I mean your business. Don't have loans to your wife and your housekeeper paid through the business. And I'm not being facetious. This happens all the time. Think like a big company, even when you're a small company. The due diligence will get you. It'll waste time. You don't want intercompany loans and shareholders borrowing from the company and tax unpaid and compliance and unwieldy shareholding that's not, they want to see a shareholders agreement. They want to see a P&L, a balance sheet. They want to see a clean set of accounts. No personal expenses run through the company. Now, it's your company, you do what you want, but I'm telling you that when it comes to a buyer, I've seen people walk away going, that's just a mess. It's probably quite a good company, but my God, they've got a yacht that's written off as a photocopier and whatever. And, there's illegal stuff, which is stupid, but then there's just mixing personal with business, and it doesn't help you when it comes to sell. And also, be careful of margin shock. So you've sold your business with your pitch to the buyer, and you've done this, and when they get in, they see your margins are really low, that most of your work's contingent, that your temp margin is rock bottom. They just walk away. And then I like to say, leave something tasty on the table, and so do some simple but smart things, like a buyer likes to see a growth strategy. If you can say, look, I'll make these numbers up, 3 years ago, we turned over 10 million. Now it's 12. The next year it was 12, and the next year was 14. And here's our business plan for next year. It goes to 16. And here's our business plan for 3 years. And we'll do these things and it takes it to 20. And the profit's going up accordingly. So I love that. Got to be realistic. Go forward budgets, realistic, provable. But they're not buying it to keep it the way it is. They're buying it to benefit from the upside. And get the opportunities laid out, the work in progress, how your market's growing, how clients of yours are growing. Make it easy for the buyer to see a golden future. And it needs to be true, but of course, you can give it a bit of polish. That's what selling is. It's up to the buyer to see how realistic it is. But make it easy for them to see that this is a good buy. So these are the factors that will affect your value. We've talked about them in some way, but a summary: risk of future profits, the business mix, how much is reliant on the owners, the succession management team, that's key, a good track record, lovely graph showing up, or even a bit of down, which, COVID, we understand, the decline in the last 2 years, we understand, but if you can show you better than market, they'll like that. Rigor around future profitability. In other words, I mean that it will be profitable going forward. Multiple revenue streams coming from temp and perm recruiters. Multiple, not 5 recruiters in a room somewhere. Highly profitable maybe, but highly risky. Training process, the margins, the regional footprint might be important. PSLs might be important if they're real. Good bonus plan. Good working capital. And then some compromise on the deal structure, because that's always going to be contentious. I'm going to throw to questions. I have written 2 books. Both of them are borderline genius. You certainly appreciate that. And you can get them off my website. There is the website, the SRA. That's the name of my recruitment academy, which is training academy. And there's 200 hours of training on that, and a lot of other things, which you can see on the website. So have a look at that. If you want to inquire about signing up, there's a pricing page, but my friend John will give you a 15% discount if you quote this webinar. And of course, thank you to Recruiterflow, who have hosted this and who are working diligently to help recruitment companies become more productive with their technology. Thank you to them for what they've done. And Manan, I'm now open to questions if there are any.
There are questions. I will. Thank you so much, Greg. We are already at time, but we can extend. It's as long. I think we can take a few questions, but I do have a few comments. So a lot of what Greg has said, really has resonated with me. Some of the comments. So Heidrick & Struggles, right, like the Shrek 5, one of the biggest executive search firms in the world, they went for about 9.8x of their EBITDA. Again, although they are known as a massive, executive search firm, they have pretty big consulting and pretty big RPO revenue. And of course, right, like not all businesses are going at that kind of multiples. This is Headliner, one of the big behemoths, right, like as we call them. They are going at 10x multiple in the current environment. On another thing, right, like we recently released a report analyzing all the large publicly traded recruitment companies and analyzing their EBITDA multiples and all of finding the real truth behind the financial mumbo jumbo. What we saw was that among all the big ones, Robert Half is the one that commands the highest EBITDA multiple consistently. And it's not that Robert Half is the biggest. They don't have the highest growth. They don't have the highest GP. What they have is consistency, right? Like, so, post-COVID, all the recruitment businesses kind of just, started shooting up, and come 2023, everybody started crashing down. It happened with Robert Half as well, but as the crash came in 23, 24, they were much more resilient through that period, and investors, very savvy, public market investors are rewarding that very, very handsomely. And all that behavior trickles down, right? Like, so when you are getting your business evaluated, consistency is going to, having very consistent business is going to give you a better multiple. So that's what I think Greg alluded to very early, that, you made 100K in the first year, 500K in the second year, and $1 million in the third year. Don't think that you are going to be given a valuation on million. You are going to get a valuation on the average of maybe last 3 years, maybe last 5 years, depending on how, what kind of fluctuations you have seen over the last few years.